Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. We're very pleased to share with you today work that is being conducted under the U.S. Department of Education's Investing in Innovation Grant Program, a program administered under the Office of Innovation and Improvement. The program has funded 172 grants that operate in 50 states and the District of Columbia, and they are working with over 2 million students. The I3 program aims to develop and expand practices that accelerate student achievement and that will prepare every student to succeed in college and in their careers. Among those students, among our students in grades K to 12 in our schools are many students who are learning English as a second or additional language, while also learning the academic content that they need to achieve. There are approximately 4.8 million English learners in our public schools, and they comprise about 10% of all students in grades K to 12. And so with that in mind, our webinar today is one of particular interest to many schools and teachers and districts. My name is Annette Zahler. I'm a facilitator, together with my colleague Mihiri Silva at WestAT, for the I3 grantee community of practice that focuses on English learners. The two grantees today will be sharing their work and discussing how they work to improve English learner student achievement, working together in collaboration with their participating school districts. Our presenters today will discuss two projects, Leading with Learning, or LWL, and Teaching English Learners English Early Mathematics, or TEEM. For Leading with Learning, Pam Spiescher is the project director from WestAT, and she will be presenting together with Fabian, who is also working on the project as the district co-facilitator and coach for Fresno Unified School District. Then as the second grant, we will have presenting on Teaching English Learners Early Mathematics, the TEAM project, Madeline Jetter, who is the project director, California State University of San Bernardino, and Deborah Badula, who is a teacher at Harvest Valley Elementary School in the Romoland School District. Both projects provide models for improving teaching and learning practices and also improving educational outcomes for English learner students through powerful teacher professional learning. Their approaches engage teachers in careful observation and examination of English learners' learning needs, and also careful observation and examination of the outcomes of the instruction. So they are both supporting teachers in very important ways and engaging in professional learning. In the project today, in their presentations today, some of the questions that you will hear addressed are, what does high-quality professional learning for teachers of English learners entail? And what happens for English learner students? What do we observe when teachers take on high-leverage pedagogical practices and professional practices focused on the English learners? And how are these approaches strengthened by collaboration within or across schools? So we'll be looking across both of the projects. They're both addressing these kinds of issues. Before we start and have the presenters begin to speak, let me just note again, as you saw in the first slide, that the webinar will be recorded and it will be available as an archive for later viewing on the I3 website, and you have the link there. We also want to note, as before, that live captioning is available, and that was a link to that was available earlier. Also, we are welcoming your comments and questions. Please enter them in the chat box. We'll be stopping after each presentation very briefly and answering some questions then, and the presenters may also be answering some of the questions or reacting to comments in the chat box as they present. We're going to also hold for reserve some time at the end, about 5 to 10 minutes at the end, for a broader discussion of the presentations and for the cross-cutting themes that are seen in the two presentations. So with that, let me start to introduce you to our agenda again, and we'll begin, as mentioned before, with Leading with Learning, with Pam Spiescher and Thea Fabian, and then we will stop briefly for questions, and then we will go on to the team presentation with Madeline Jetter and Deborah Baudula. So, Pam, would you like to begin?
I would love to. Hello, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the country. It's a huge honor and pleasure to be with you today to share some of what we're doing in our project, to hear from one of the people who is doing the heavy lifting on the ground to make a positive difference in the lives of our students who are learning English as an additional language. So thanks so much for letting us share. Again, I'm Pam Spiescher. I'm the project director for our I3 grant project called Leading with Learning. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the I3 grant program, Annette described a little bit about it, but it's a really wonderful grant opportunity because it promotes true partnership between the grantee and their partner districts, and our partner districts are Fresno Unified School District and Sacramento City Unified School District in California. And it also promotes partnership with the private sector, which has really been fantastic. We've learned a lot through our collaborations with our private sector funders, and you can see who they are on the screen there. And I want to say the part that Thea and I are going to talk about is broken into two parts. The first part, I'm just going to provide a very brief overview of what leading with learning is, so you can wrap your brains around that. And then the second part is basically an interview with Thea Fabian, who is one of the coaches. She's a district person. She's a coach of teachers in the project, and she also co-facilitates the professional learning. So without further ado, I'm going to get started. But I did want to mention that the overview is going to probably seem very fast. And so if you have additional questions, I want to invite you to our website. There's a screenshot there. It's Leading with Learning. You can just Google it. Or you can contact me if you have questions. I'd be happy to speak with you. All right, so just to get started, we went into this project with this burning question, this burning inquiry question that we really wanted to figure out, and that question was, how do we create the conditions for high quality teaching and learning experiences for our children and youth who are culturally and linguistically diverse, particularly our English learners? And when we say conditions, we mean not just high quality materials for teachers to use, but how do we create the infrastructure, the support structures that promote a sense of agency and empowerment for all people in the system, from students, through teachers, through coaches, principals, district leadership teams. How do we do that? And so that's the adventure that we embarked upon, and we're going to share a little bit about where we are now. We're in our final and third year of the project, and we certainly have learned a lot through our partnerships. So part one, I'm going to just give you a little overview of the project. What is this thing we call Leading with Learning? What do teachers do? What do they learn and do in the project? And how are the approaches that teachers are learning and coaches are learning and principals are learning, how are these approaches strengthened within schools and across schools? So those are the questions that I'm going to attempt to very quickly address. Let's see. So what you see before you now, there's a lot of text on that slide. I apologize. I'm violating all sorts of PowerPoint protocols and principles. But just to give you a sort of an overview of what the teacher's course looks like. It's a 2-year course, and there are 10 full day sessions over the course of the 2 years. It's preschool through 6th grade, and it's whole school. So all of the teachers in school have to vote basically to participate. Which kind of shows readiness and a willingness to embark upon this adventure. And the other critical thing for us is that we start with, in this project, we start with 2 or 3 schools so that there can be some cross-school collaboration. We have our teachers working together across schools. And then the idea is to expand out to additional schools. So we ground the teachers' learning in two interdisciplinary units. The first one is basically social studies, ELA, ELD, using culturally responsive texts and getting into things like close reading of complex texts and effective questioning and writing. And then the second unit is an interdisciplinary science, ELA and ELD unit, focused on environmental science, where the students learn about ecosystems and the keystone species within them. So that's the high, and then they learn high leverage pedagogical approaches within those units that they can go and try in their classroom. They and then in both years there's a requirement, because it's a course, for teachers to go and try things. We call these focused application tasks. So they go and try things out, and then they come back and share what happened with their colleagues. In the second year, the first year is sort of inquiry light, and in the second year we get, it's much more systematic, and we go through what we call an inquiry for equity process, where we use a series of protocols to really get deeply into the reflection about student learning and teacher practice. So that's sort of an overview of what the teacher's course looks like. Now, I don't know about you, but in California, and I think this is the same nationwide, our teachers are trying to learn and manage and implement multiple sets of standards. So they've got their reading language arts standards, their ELD standards, their next generation science standards. And so we kind of frame all of the teaching and learning and professional learning around these four big areas. We call them four big areas of classroom advocacy for English learners. You can see on the screen what they are. And these should not be necessarily new things to people, but we're really trying to reinforce them because we know how important they are for English learners. The bottom right-hand box might be new to some people. This is, I think, one of the things that makes our project unique. This is really building students' language awareness, kind of getting into analyzing the language in complex text with a focus on how it's making meaning. And this happens through discussion. So it's discussion-based language analysis. And in California, I see somebody has, Thea has remarked that our core materials that we use in the teacher's course are, of course, our standards. We get really deeply into supporting teachers to use the standards to drive their instruction. So we do a lot of standard analysis. We model lessons that are aligned to the standards and address the standards. And in California, we also have, which I believe is still the first in the nation and only in the nation, English Language Arts, English Language Development Curriculum Framework, which really guides this integration of standards. So, and just very briefly, our model extends beyond the teacher's course. The teacher's course is really what grounds everything, because we know that in order to really make change, we've got to really focus significantly and substantively on teaching and learning, what happens in the classroom, right? So what you see here is our comprehensive model, which includes our teacher's course, our coach's course, which is its own set of learning tasks, and that's blended. So that's both face-to-face and online. We have online PLCs. We have a principals course to support our principals, our site leaders in their work, and then we work with district leadership teams to really kind of reach across departments and share the responsibility for the success of English learners, and create scaling and sustainability plans to make sure that this work continues and expands after the 2-year period where we're there. And in our project, we really view coaches as the key levers of change. So the coaches are not only co-facilitating most of the time, they're co-facilitating all of the teacher professional learning, and then doing the in-between session coaching that is so critical and really is what gets implementation going. but they also have their own course, and they also serve as a thought partner and support person for principals. And so what we're going to do now is I'm going to stop talking about what the project is, kind of that context grounding, and we're going to interview a coach who does the work on the ground so you can get a taste of what this looks like. So I'm going to be asking Thea to address these questions from her perspective. What do coaches do in leading with learning? Like, what is their role? What are their responsibilities? From her perspective, what happens for English learner students when teachers are implementing these practices? And then finally, what happens for teachers and leaders in general through this project? So I'm going to pass the ball over. Oh, Thea has the ball. Great. And Thea, I'm just going to let you share, and then if I may jump back to some of these questions at some point, but please share your wisdom with us.
Okay, that sounds great. Can you hear me all right, Pam?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so in this slide, we see a document that we use frequently in our project called the Student Discourse and Learning Inquiry Tool. And this has been a great guide for us to have rich conversations with teaching teams, with admin, with other coaches about what we want to see in those 4 big areas for advocacy for English learners that we'd like to see in all classrooms. Important to note is that this is a conversation piece. This document helps us to look at student behaviors that really help to highlight what students are doing when there is abundant writing and rich conversations around complex text, when there's text-oriented talk about language, that piece that's new to a lot of people, when there is a culturally responsive environment, and when there is observing students closely and providing that planned and just-in-time scaffolding. So this document was really important to always come back to and talk about what we were seeing in student behaviors in the whole process of this project. This document is one of the many, many writing samples that we collected throughout the course. This writing reflects a week of learning around a rich, rich story called The Spider and the Fly. And this was a rich interactive read-aloud process that highlighted the development of understanding story structure and the specific language that belongs to stories. And the students in this case were retelling a story, and the writing that they were able to do reflects the conversations that they had around the text over the time, and so you can see a lot of pieces of the language that they actually picked up from the language that they were discussing of the actual writer of the story. And then here is the printed out language from that same author's retelling of the story. You can see in this text that the student is utilizing a lot of the same language of the characters in the story. Come up my winding stairs. If you're familiar with the story, it's in a more archaic form of English that we worked on with the children. Come hither. The story also begins with a really good orientation. The retelling orients us to where it's happening, introducing the characters, then we get retold the story. And then near the end, this little author is able to capture a nice resolution to the story. So in this retelling, she's really captured that unique structure that stories have. And then I love the expression on this little girl's face. Really important to this project is to bring in the joy of learning and really empower the students with a sense that they are intelligent learners and contributors, and they are writers. And the joy that we see in students when they're able to really master this language of, in this case it's storytelling, but we've also done this through week-long processes and unit planning in science informational text and other types of text. We really want to capture this joy and collaboration with peers in the language development process and the writing development process. Okay, so this slide is really important. In the framework, our vignettes are highlighting aspects of what is called the teaching and learning cycle. And if you're familiar with this work, it involves 5 phases of interrelated work in order to help scaffold students into developing very well-written academic texts. So in phase 1, we have building the field, which means building really rich content knowledge. And that could be, for example, in our science projects, building very specific scientific knowledge around what we're going to be talking about. Phase 2, exploring the language of text types. I'll just stay with science. We would look at how science writers put together their texts in terms of purpose, structure, and language features. In phase 3, joint construction of text. This is where teachers facilitate the development of texts that are derived from all of the students' ideas of what they want to put in the text. And the teacher guides the students to writing texts that really exemplify the purpose, structure, and language features that are appropriate in that disciplinary writing. And in 4, we have independent construction of text where students put together their own texts that demonstrate this ability to put together texts with a purpose, structure, language features, and rich content. In phase 5, we have reflection on the text that we've written, and that involves student-led discussions, teacher-led discussions, rich conversations with teacher and peers about what was done well, and maybe some points of improvement and revision. And the important thing about this is that the goal is student autonomy with writing high-level academic texts in different disciplines. We know that we have texts that are privileged in school, and we want to make sure we give our students all of the opportunities possible to master the reading of these disciplinary texts and the writing of them. And then this slide illustrates something really important. We take an additive approach to learning language. So for example, when we speak of students' abilities in language, we always say first, you know, what are the students able to do? Students come to school with rich knowledge and rich language abilities, and it's just that the language that's privileged in school is not necessarily the language that they come with. So through this project, as coaches, as teachers, as administrators, as district leaders, we developed a sense that, you know, what we're doing in school is we're adding to what children are already able to do. Like they're usually able to say, I don't like the spider. My favorite part was the fly. She said, no, it's scary. And we're working on a register continuum to advance students through being able to master the specific language of the text type that writers use. In this case, it's a story, but in other cases, it will be different types of writing. So this additive stance is really important in our approach to seeing students and really understanding what we're doing. And this is me with the students in a classroom at Rawl Elementary School, and we are working on developing this writing and conversations around the text. And you can see that some of our notes from the class and kids interacting. We have a lot of charts to refer back to information that we've discussed, and in organizing our retell of the information.
Thea, could you talk a little bit, could you go back to that slide and just talk very briefly, because I mentioned earlier that we really position coaches as key levers of this positive change in school districts.
Oh, yes.
And so could you just talk a little bit how the coaches in this project coach teachers?
Oh, yes, of course. So one of the reasons that I'm doing this in a classroom is I was working with this fabulous teacher by the name of Marcelina at Rawl Elementary in Fresno. She's a wonderful first grade teacher, and it's amazing the work that she puts in with her kids. And in learning these new processes, a lot of what we do is we go into classrooms and we will plan with the teachers, and sometimes the teachers will be executing instruction. And in this case, I'm executing a week-long development of this interactive read aloud process. We have called it Spiral. And it's actually around a 5-day process. And so the teacher, you can't see her in the picture, but she's sitting very close to me, and so are some other teachers. And what we would do following these sessions is we would go out and we would have rich conversations about what the students were doing. What was happening? What were they saying to each other? What were they writing? What did you see in their interactions? What was being developed? So this is the format of the intensing coaching aspect of the project, where we have this constant back and forth conversation, and sometimes I'm demonstrating practices, and sometimes the teachers are doing it, and sometimes we're planning together. And then this is one other example. We have really so many examples from our project because there's so many areas to look at. But in this case, this is a cohesion analysis of a response to literature, and some of the aspects of the writing are pointed out that help to create cohesion in this analysis. So in this case, the writer's talking about Gonzalo, a character in the story Seed Folks, how he feels proud of this equation that he's put together. And the equation in this case is something about, the meaning of life. and all of these aspects that are highlighted are linked together, and it's how the writer makes connections and creates cohesion in the text. So this kind of work, especially around cohesion, helped the teachers to understand maybe going beyond vocabulary and understanding how language works to present coherent text. And this is work that we would do with the teachers in the intensive coaching, and that we would support them to do with their students in understanding how English works in academic text. And then we have this little box pointed out. This is an area of our 4 big areas for classroom advocacy for ELS that people are not very familiar with. Our ELD standards, and especially our Part 2 standards, point out the specific language features and structural pieces and purpose of text that really need to be mastered in school that are not evident to students and need and require some explicit and implicit teaching. So this points to the purposeful planning with teachers. This is a figure from our framework, and we have framing questions for all students, and we also have additional questions for ELS. Our framework has so many resources that we utilized in this process that really point to questions we need to ask ourselves when we're planning for high leverage instruction. So we've been able to pull numerous documents from our framework to guide our work and to be a constant support to us in planning this work. And then at the bottom here, we have analyze the text itself to determine what it affords. A lot of our work involved text analysis and preparing teachers and coaches in how to analyze text. And again, we would analyze text for content, for themes, but we would also analyze text for the purpose, the structure, and the specific language features that we want to work on with students. And then we would always ask the question, what do my students need? And how do I know? How is it that I know that? And that reflects a constant attention to assessment for learning, the assessment that happens while teaching and learning are in progress, so that we gather as much information about our students as we can to inform our practice. This is a snapshot of 2 little pictures of our a couple coaching sessions. These are district coaches from Sacramento and Fresno, and one of the great aspects of the project is that we were able to collaborate with these coaches and leaders from Sacramento, and that really informed our work and bring in a constant dialogue about ideas to improve instruction in both Fresno Unified and Sac City Unified. Pam, did you want to add anything else before questions?
I don't think so. I think we might have gone over a little bit on our time. So thank you. That was a beautiful explanation of what you do as a coach.
So we actually should probably move on to the next presentation, and perhaps if there our questions, they might be addressed in our later discussion. Unless, Pam, you see a question there that you wanted to address more immediately.
There is one about, people are kind of asking where these materials might be. We, on our website, one of the things that we're trying to do to disseminate this work is I've started a blog, so we have some blog posts that give little stories about what's happening with some white papers and also just some examples. And the other thing that was asked are the Keystone pedagogies linked explicitly to specific teacher competencies. They're not explicitly linked to teacher competencies, although I think that's a great idea. We should probably do that. They are very explicitly linked to California's ELE standards and Common Core reading and language arts standards, as well as the NGSS. So in our lesson plans, we make very explicit connections to the standards so teachers understand how the Keystone pedagogies are enacting and supporting students' development of those standards.
So thanks so much, Pam and Thea. That was really very interesting, and we'll look forward to discussing further at the end of toward the end of our webinar session. I'd like to turn it over now to the TEEM project, to Madeline Jetter and Deborah Badilla. Are you ready to pick up, Madeline?
Yes, thank you. I hope you can hear me okay.
Sounds good.
Great. So thank you. I'm Madeline Jetter from Cal State San Bernardino, and I'm the project director for Teaching English Learners Early Mathematics, or TEAM. And I'm here with Deborah Badilla. She's a teacher at Harvest Valley Elementary School in the Romoland School District in Riverside County in California, and she's a participant in our project. So after giving a short overview of TEAM, I'd like to focus on the work that our teachers do in lesson study collaboration. So I'll describe our model for lesson study, and my co-presenter, Deborah, will share an example of her work with her team of first grade teachers in lesson study. We'll also discuss our learnings from the project and from lesson study. Okay, so TEAM, or Teaching English Learners Early Mathematics, is a 4-year professional development partnership supported by an Investing in Innovation grant with additional funding from the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, also Heising-Simons, Toyota USA, and the David and Lucille Packard Foundations. We're in the wrapping up the second year of our 4-year project. We're a partnership between my university, Cal State San Bernardino, the Riverside County Office of Ed, the Romoland School District, New View Union School District, and also Romoland Head Start and state preschool programs. We count about 70 educator participants. These are classroom teachers, some coaches, and some classroom aides, and also the 8 school principals and site director. Okay. So our project focuses specifically on improving the learning of mathematics for English learners in the early grades for several reasons. First, in our partner districts and across our state, California, we see that English learners are most concentrated in the early grades. Also, the math achievement gaps that open in those primary years tend to persist throughout the school years. And research by Greg Duncan and others has shown how early skill in mathematics is highly predictive of later success in school. Finally, California began implementing a new set of rigorous mathematics standards in 2014, and we saw a need to support educators in making needed instructional shifts to meet those standards, also while giving their English learners access to those standards. So with all that in mind, our focus in TEAM, again, is to improve the math achievement of English learners in the early years. And we've implemented 3 main interventions in order to do that. So first of all of our participants attend an 8-day summer institute that focuses on math content with attention to best practices for English learners. And in that photo on the right, you can see a small group of our teachers in the summer institute. Second, we do interactive notebooking. So each TEAM teacher is issued a class set of composition books so that students can keep interactive notebooks during math time. And the intent here is to capture a record of their learning and for the student to reflect on that learning. And in the photo on the left there, you can see how some second graders are using their composition books to record the work they're doing with 10 frames. So thirdly, let me go back for a second here. So the third component of our project that I'd like to focus on actually is the lesson study collaboration that our teachers engage in through the academic year. Okay, so with that, some more on lesson study. So lesson study is a method of teacher-driven inquiry that aims for incremental improvements to instruction through collaboration. And lesson study has some features that research has identified as characteristics of high-quality professional development. Namely, it is ongoing, it's connected to practice, and it's connected to specific content, in our case, mathematics. Lesson study has been gaining attention in the United States ever since Stigler and Hebert came out with the teaching gap in 1999. And they described the Japanese practice of lesson study and really credited that practice with the high quality of Japanese instruction. So I'll describe what happens in a typical cycle of team lesson study in the next few slides. So this diagram shows how teachers collaborate to study, plan, teach, observe, and reflect on a lesson. So an entire cycle takes place over 3 in-service days, and our team teachers complete 2 cycles of lesson study in each project year. So that's 6 days total engaged in lesson study. So I want to describe each phase of inquiry and how it can support teachers in reaching their English learners. And you'll notice me highlighting the most relevant points in each phase as I describe them. So first, in the study phase, teachers examine curriculum resources. They often review progressions documents that lay out the expectations from one grade level to the next. And an important part of this phase in lesson study involves determining student needs. So teachers often incorporate formative assessment to help them better understand what their students need. This might involve assigning a performance task, examining student notebooks, or another assessment chosen by the group. And based on this work, the teachers set their goals for their inquiry. Next, in the planning phase, teachers select the lesson content and they design their lesson. So teachers often learn a great deal by trying out a task before they give it to their students. So by seeing how many different methods their colleagues can find to solve a math problem, teachers build their own ability to anticipate and respond to student approaches. And this turns out to be such a crucial element of planning instruction. Also, as part of the lesson planning, teachers decide what evidence of student learning they'll look for. So some lesson study teams choose one or more focal students, and they follow these students' progress throughout the lesson. Those focal students may be chosen based on language proficiency or other reasons chosen by the group. And our team teachers typically spend 1 full day on the study and planning portion of the lesson study cycle, so those first 2 ovals that you see here. So next, in the teaching phase, one teacher from the team teaches the lesson while the other team observes the live lesson. So all the teachers observing the lesson then collect data as agreed by the group in their observation protocol. And for us, this usually takes place in the 2nd day of a lesson study cycle. So the really key question that teachers try to answer through observation is, what do we see students doing and what do we hear students saying to develop key habits of mind and show their understanding? And this really focuses teachers on what students are actually learning. And then finally, in the reflection phase, the group reconvenes to examine their data, identify student learning and misconceptions, and generalize their conclusions and determine next steps. So if time allows, teams will make adjustments to the lesson and then teach and observe the revised lesson a 2nd time. They might teach the same lesson to a different group of students, or they may teach a different lesson based on the needs revealed in the original lesson. So again, team teachers complete the full cycle as I've described it here over the course of 3 days. And in each project year, teachers complete 2 cycles of lesson study across 6 in-service days. So I've got a team participant here, Deborah Badilla, and she's here to describe her experience through an actual cycle of lesson study with her first grade team. So I'll hand it over to Deborah now.
Good day, everybody. Okay, to start off our day, our group, which usually consists of 6 to 8 teachers, we work on developing our norms for the lesson study in order to ensure that our day will be as productive as possible. Our duties for lesson study will change with each lesson, such as being the facilitator, recorder, note-taker. We discuss possible topics to conduct a lesson study based upon classroom assessments and historically what concepts students may have had difficulty understanding. Once we narrow our focus, we review the state standards relative to the concept we wish to study. We look at our University of Arizona Progressions document, which explains why standards are sequenced the way they are, point out cognitive difficulties, and pedagogical solutions. We read articles relative to the focus of our lesson study, which gives us more background before planning. We then use the backwards mapping methods in order to develop our lesson sequence. We determine the flow of the lesson based upon our objectives and start with a number talk usually, and number talks were developed for classroom teachers to engage students in mental math through grappling with interesting mathematics problems. Target vocabulary is determined through planning, taking into account the EL proficiency levels and how vocabulary will be utilized within the context of the lesson. We develop anchor charts, gather manipulatives, prepare sentence frames, station rotations within the blended learning model, strategies to use with students for language development with a goal to develop their CALP, which is a cognitive academic language proficiency, or formal academic learning, which includes the listening, speaking, reading, and writing about the subject area content material, because as time goes on, the language demands become more cognitively demanding. Also, an important component is the journaling, which is incorporated into every lesson. Enrichment activities are developed as well, and differentiation of the lessons, such as use of various sentence frames, and also differentiated online programs. Okay, then what our group had agreed upon to study was 10 frames and equality. Our previous experience and research confirmed that children in elementary grades generally do not see the equal sign as a symbol that expresses a relationship is the same as. They usually think that the equal sign means they should carry out the calculation that precedes it, and the number after the equal sign is the answer to the calculation. We knew that it was important to cognitively plan for the lesson to determine students' understanding of 10 frames and equality. The cognitive planning process is basically the act of mentally anticipating the right way to reach a certain goal, which is the crux of your planning for a successful lesson.
And by the way, the photograph you see there, this is Madeline, is from their actual lesson that they taught in the classroom.
After the initial lesson, and allowing the students to practice and discover in pairs using the same game cards, but their own set of double 10 frames, it helped to keep them on track during the activity. Some students watched others, and others copied until they understood the concept. Some students needed more guidance through questioning strategies posed by the teacher at their level of English proficiency. Some needed to go back to a 5 frame to get a better grasp of the concept before returning to 10 frames and double 10 frames. I also noticed that the use of the manipulatives contributed to their metacognitive processing, as well as allowing them to work it out on their own or with a partner before teacher posing guiding questions if necessary. This lowered their affective filter, making them feel more at ease. What I noticed was that the students using the counters in the double 10 frame for the equation 9 plus 7. Then some of them discovered that by rearranging the same counters to first create a 10, then adding the leftover counters to the second 10 frame, they made a new equation which helped them to understand the concept of equality. i.e. 9 plus 7 equals 10 plus 6. With some, they were able to grasp the concept through the discovery and manipulation of the counters, some trying several times. For some, I used their primary language of Spanish to question them, which assisted their comprehension and again lowered their affective filter. With others, I varied the use of language to the level of English proficiency within their zone of proximal development with the knowledge that ELs are learning a new language as well as a new concept. Using clear, explicit language when the new concept was introduced and identified the instructional objective helped the teacher stay focused. One thing I learned is that we must remain consistent in our use of target vocabulary, allowing our EL students to experience it in multiple modalities and manners within the context of the lesson. For instance, using the words fill up the 10 frame seemed to create the situation where students wanted to grab more counters to fill up the 10 frame. So it was important that we stay consistent in using the term rearrange. Okay, so what are my learning from the lesson study? Well, one of the items, sentence frames supporting discourse and writing. Students can practice through various structured language practice activities and strategies what they want to say before verbalizing to a partner using the sentence frames, which they can then use when writing with scripts, as well, which scaffolds their learning, such as in the first part, etc. Visual and manipulative tools. Research has shown that when the children are encouraged to make sense of the mathematics by using the manipulatives as tools to solve the problems posed, they were able to transfer the knowledge to novel situations and also to solve problems posed symbolically, which assisted with the concept of equality and use of the equal sign. The importance of the group work, partner talk, the wait time. So as you may know, all students, but especially English language learners, need many and varied opportunities to practice their skills with assistance from the teacher as well as independently. During the initial lesson, we provided students with multiple opportunities to respond and engage students in choral response activities, elbow partnering, and paired sharing. This provided ELs with a low-risk setting for practicing new skills while simultaneously providing the teacher an efficient way of providing all students adequate practice. Students then practice the skills and strategies they learned through student-directed activities such as peer tutoring and cooperative learning. Explicit discourse markers are particularly effective if you pair them with visual prompts, such as utilizing the fingers for different their different learnings. A second effective practice is to consistently use targeted academic language to develop their CALP, which is the Cognitive Academic Language Proficiency, but allowing students to use their BICs, their basic interpersonal communication skills, their informal language, to make sense of what they're learning. And the importance of cognitive planning. The cognitive planning encompasses the neurological processes involved in the formulation, evaluation, and selection of a sequence of thoughts and actions to achieve a desired goal.
Okay, so I hope you could hear from Deborah's experience just the level of detail that goes into that reflection, some of the specific learnings that arise out of observing those students and how students react to something that a teacher might toss off without really thinking about, like fill up versus rearrange. And Catherine Lewis talks about teachers engaged in lesson study developing the eyes to see students, and that's really what we hear in a lot of our teacher comments. So these are some of the comments that teachers make about their learning and lesson study. So one, what I thought students were learning and what they're actually learning are two different things. And teachers often don't see it until they really are in the classroom watching their students this closely. And then secondly, Deborah, would you?
Oh, yes. So we need to allow the students the time to discover, come up with their own understanding. It doesn't help the student when the teacher directly teaches everything to the student. And these are strategies that I've learned through my involvement with the TEEM grant facilitators, which is headed by Dr. Jetter, and I really do thank them for all of this learning.
All right, thanks, Deborah. Right, and the other aspect of lesson study, I think it sort of gives teachers that freedom to experiment with something and then observe the results. So that learning about, given the time to discover, the teacher may not have felt free to do that without the setting of lesson study. So that's been our experience. And so we're ready to open it up for questions, comments, or connections that people saw.
Hi, this is Annette again. We have seen a couple of questions that have asked more generally about how the projects have been evaluated, and one that asks about any findings on student growth.
I can. Oh, go ahead. Okay. I was just going to say that one thing at the school level that we've done in the Leading with Learning project is we've conducted several writing walks across the schools and the grade spans where we look at how the kids are progressing in the content, themes, purpose, structure, and language features of the writing that is being worked on, and if kids are having the opportunity to write across the range of text types that are really important in school. And so that's like kind of on a local level, and I'll pass the baton to Pam for more of the systems evaluation.
Yeah. So we are trying really hard to have a more nuanced and comprehensive approach to measuring impact. And so in each of our projects, in each of the I3 projects, we have external evaluators who are looking at impact in terms of, I won't speak for Madeline, but in our project it's looking at standardized tests, growth on both academic standards tests and English language proficiency tests are CELT, for example, and internally, and then of course lots of surveys and interviews and things of that nature. And then internally within the schools, we've been working with principals and coaches and district leadership teams to really work on their processes and approaches and tools for measuring progress and growth in a more timely manner. So as Thea was mentioning, one of our requirements is for them to take field trips, teachers to take field trips to other classrooms, for principals to visit the school and kind of measure like the quantity and quality of writing. And then they have local assessment data that they've been looking at, reclassification data, their benchmark test data, and that's kind of a purpose of the project too, to get more internal focus on measuring impact and growth to be able to do something with it in a timely manner.
And this is Madeline. So in terms of our evaluation, we also look at student assessment data, both in mathematics and in English language arts. In our first year, we really have been focused on seeing teacher growth, in hopes that the student results will follow in the second and later years of the project. We also look at the notebooks themselves, as a measure of the fidelity of implementation of the project.
There are a couple of other questions. There's one that asks about outreach to parents of English learners and to what extent parents are informed about the program. And then also one about the teachers and the degree to which teachers were bilingual and any role of that.
I'll say that for Leading with Learning project, one of the aspects is that the schools began to post the student work very visibly within the halls of the schools. And they would invite parents to view this work and have conversations. Also, the teachers were having a lot of conversations with parents about what the students were doing, because, the work was changing from what the students had previously done, or I should say more work was being amplified in certain ways. And then I'll also say that at the same time that this project was taking place, Fresno Unified was rewriting their English Learner Master Plan, and this involved a lot of rich community discussions involving parents and families. And we also used our district ELAC, our DLAC, to inform parents about a lot of the changes that were happening, and giving them knowledge about the importance of, you know, specific academic language being developed, and some of the processes that were happening in school.
And I'll just add that this is Pam, in one of our bigger units of study, the theme is family, community, and identity. And in that unit, we use some culturally responsive text, culturally relevant text. The culminating tasks that students are asked to do in the units have to do with things like interviewing parents, celebrating their communities and their families. And so the idea is to promote this school family you know, communication and collaboration. And then somebody else also asked about how many of the teachers were bilingual. One of the interesting things in our project was that we, of course, in California, we're kind of experiencing a renaissance of bilingual education, which is very exciting. And this project in particular, I think, appealed to bilingual schools because a lot of the work that we're doing has to do with culturally and linguistically responsive teaching, which clearly fits very nicely in bilingual programs. And the partnership was very rich because we were actually co-constructing a lot of the materials for bilingual classrooms. And then one of the principals pointed out in one of our final principals course sessions was that one of the results was that it created greater communication and collaboration among the bilingual teachers at the school, or the bilingual strand, teachers in the bilingual strand in the school, and the teachers who were not in the bilingual strand, because they were working toward the same, on the same approaches, toward the same goals, et cetera. So those have been some interesting learnings for us. But we're very excited about our collaboration with our bilingual schools, both Spanish, English, and Hmong English schools.
Yeah, just one quick comment is that in that process, we worked very hard to raise the level of academic language instruction in Spanish, because we're very much committed to the desire to have our kids in our dual immersion programs and bilingual programs perform at a very high level in academic Spanish also, and that took a great deal of work, but certainly worthwhile.
We have just a couple minutes left in the time remaining, and I was just wondering if you could each briefly speak a little bit to the point that each of them do involve some sort of systemic change in the collaboration among the teachers, and I believe collaboration within the districts, and wondering if you just had brief comments that you might make on that.
Well, so this is Madeline. You know, for us, it's really the lesson study collaboration, and that collaboration takes place across sites, and in some cases across districts. You know, when teachers are working in grade level groups.
Yeah. So I think similarly, this is Pam. We build into the model an infrastructure for collaboration. So as I mentioned, it's a whole school model, so everyone's sharing the responsibility. And then we group teachers by grade span, so across schools. So preschool through first grade is grouped together, and 3 or 4 schools working together. It's 2, 3, 4, 6, and so that's for teachers. And then the another systemic approach is in our principal network, principal courses, all of the principals from the Leading with Learning schools get together and visit one another's schools, and then work on common problems of practice, areas for growth. The coaches are coaches from across the entire district, so that makes it a district-wide initiative, and then they work together across both districts. And then finally, our district leadership teams, really that's, I think, an area of a lot of excitement right now, because you know, a lot of, well, I don't know if a lot, but in my experience, many district leaders across departments don't necessarily work together on the shared responsibility of improving practice and policies and programs for English learners, and we've actually created an infrastructure for it where they engage deeply in discussions about the work itself, about impact, and about how to scale and sustain the work over time. So those are some systemic methods that we've used in our project.
Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for your attendance today. I particularly want to express our appreciation to Pam Spiescher and Thea Fabian of the Leading with Learning project, and Madeline Jetter and Deborah Budula of the Teaching English Learners Early Mathematics project. If you'd like more information about these and about the I3 program, please visit our website. And thank you very much. Again, a reminder, this will be archived, and so you can go back and listen to sections of it later. Thank you, everyone, for your participation.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.